Hey YouTube, it's Matt with Olympus Reptiles, and today is going to be kind of a business-oriented video, even though I don't have a big whiteboard behind me because I figure you guys are all tired of my handwriting. I've got something else. I've got a computer. We'll use that in a minute. So today what we're going to talk about, though, is record keeping and how we keep records here at Olympus Reptiles, what we keep records on, what records we keep temporarily, what records we keep, I'd call it semi-temporarily, and what records we keep permanently. And there is a difference in things that we keep. So we'll start with looking at this wall over here, and I'll show you a few things. I think we may have talked about this before. So our record keeping during breeding season is really simple. You'll see a lot of writing on these tubs. This is a perfect tub to show you because everything's on here. So what you're going to see is the first thing you'll notice on a lot of these tubs will have an L. There's our green L, there's our green L. This looks like a weird hieroglyphic, but it's actually an L where the pin just ran. And we just use like a liquid chalk marker. It's easy to clean off of these when the time comes. We should also tell you the white names on here. That is the male breeding the female, so you can tell what's going on in the tub. L just simply stands for lock. That means we visually observed a lock. We'll leave that on there till the season's over, and we'll erase all of this. You'll also see some that are...
You have the L before.
I said a visual lock.
But why do you track the locks?
Well, I want to know what females have been bred. So like as we're breeding, this tells me, okay, I know that male. So I know my lesser spider ghost is locking because that's the male. I can see he's doing that, so I can see what's going on. Sometimes you'll have, you know, a bunch of them missing an L, and you're like, well, is it all the same male? Hey, every female this male's breeding isn't locking. Maybe my male's just not having a good year, not ready to go, or something's going on. Another thing it lets me know is on the female specifically, or projects where we're at, you know, if we're getting that. It's just good information to have. You know, you feel better when you know those locks are going on. And I don't want to sit there. And these are things we learn over years. You know, when you're only breeding 5 females, if you're only doing that, you're like, what the hell are you doing, guy? This is overkill. Yeah, it is. It was overkill for us until we got to about 15, 20. You know, and then you're breeding a lot. Your memory is not going to cover all that. So you have to start marking down what's going on. I like visual personally, so people just keep this in the computer. If you want to do that, that's great. Then I got to open the computer. If I keep it in a cell phone, I have to open the cell phone and go through tracking. Here, I can literally just look at this tub here and be like, okay, I got a calico being bred to Apollo. It's my bumblebee male. I've seen visual locks. This O that you see on some of these in orange, it's all color coded too to make it easier on the eye, means it's ovulated. The line through it, I don't know why that got put there, to be honest. It doesn't really matter. Probably because of this. That date, 2/4/22, that is the date of that animal's pre-lay shed. So I know this tub, I can expect eggs. I know I can expect them about March 6th. You're thinking, Matt, it's 30 days to eggs. Yeah, but February's only got 28 days. So probably about March 6th, we should have eggs. So I'll start looking 1st of March to about March 15th. If it goes past that, I start to get a little nervous, right? So all that information is there. Then you have other tubs. A great example is down here in the Hellfire project. We're trying to use one of our Hellfire males we raised up. He's a little young. We haven't observed a lock there. We had a killer bee being bred to Hellfire. Ain't seen anything. Not too worried yet. She went later in the year. It's one of the reasons why we were able to pick that one, because it's probably got a few more months before I really expect much to go, because she's still getting back to, not back to size, she's back to weight, but she's still putting on a lot of weight, and I don't expect that for a little while here. Get that back up there. Roar. All these pins mean is where the male's at. So that's the information we track on the tubs themselves. We track visual locks, visual ovulations, pre-lay sheds, okay? Once this animal has eggs, we'll just draw a line through that. That way I know it's done. We won't erase it. The reason I don't erase it after eggs is because then you'll come back here and you're gonna look through and be like, did that one go already? There's nothing on the tub. Or, you know. So I just draw a line through it. It means we're done. She's already laid. I don't have to worry about doing it. It tells me I don't have to worry about pairing her. All that stuff. Just line through everything. Call it good. So that's what's tracked on there. Another thing we track, and I find this very important for breeding too, is we track feed sheets. Okay. This one is this girl's feed sheet up here. As you can see, she's locked. She's ovulated. So let's look at her feed sheet. Now there's a lot of spaces. We'll use every space on the front and on the back. So Kurt tells me we can get about 2 years of feeds on the sheet. After that, we're kind of done with it. You don't really need to go back much further than that. We'll start with a new one. We kind of know what that animal is doing though, so it's not a big deal. So here we've got this many weeks. And as you can see, we were feeding really good. Smalls ASF, Smalls pup. We were kind of low on food that time. Small skipped. skip, skip, small, 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 was breeding, skipped. That's what the circle and the line means. We attempted to feed and did not feed. We skipped it there because she was an obvious ovulation. So we're able to track through and see what's going on. We track that for every animal, males and females. Sometimes you'll see your females stop feeding at certain points in breeding season. It helps to let you know who to watch, what's going on. Helps you keep track of your males if they're working too hard and maybe you need to, pull them off. You're not just going by, I'm like, man, I don't feel like this snake's eating. Because I'll tell you, there's times like, man, I don't think this snake's been eating very well. And typically when we're feeding, Kurt's got the feed sheets, I'm throwing rats. I'll be like, Kurt, when's the last time this thing ate? He'll be like, last week. Like, oh, okay. Sometimes like, man, I hadn't eaten 2 months. Okay, man, we got to give that guy a break or check his weight or make sure we're doing good. So it's just one of those things that we use that. When that sheet's full, we kind of have a folder of them we put up there. If we really need to dig back through, we can, but it's not really organized. 2 years is enough data, and then we can restart. That kind of covers all of the quasi-permanent feed sheets. The temporary on here for records we keep. Let me show you some of the permanent records we keep. Since we're going into 2023, I went ahead and just built a new one. So we'll just do that there. Check that out. Fancy schmancy, right? So this would be a 2023 breeding log. And what we're going to do with that, oh man, I thought that'd work. Apparently it deactivates the keyboard when I do that. So we're going to start over here. So just 2023 breeding log, this will be clutch. When we get to here, what I would typically write in the first line would be who the pairing is. So we're going to pretend it to be up here. I'd write fire, yellow belly, het axanthic female, 171301, and then X for bi, diesel, or killer bee axanthic, male. So that would be listed up there. And then as we have eggs, we'd go to the next line, and those eggs would be labeled. This was the first clutch of the year. We'll say 230101, 230102, 230103 on down. So you'd have that going on down. And then after that, it's kind of where it sets. And then when they hatch out, we label the morph, right? So if we have an egg go bad, I list the eggs right away. If I have an egg go bad, I want to track that. So we'll track that there and just mark the egg with X's, but it still has an identification number, so I can go back and look how many eggs made it, how many eggs didn't. This is also where I track slugs, so I can track my slug rate. So I'd also like, I guess, after the pairing, I would write how many eggs were laid and what date. Laid this date, 7 eggs, 2 slugs. Pretty simple stuff, right? And then under morph, once we identify the morph, we fill that out. So this one, we could have something like a fire, yellow belly, pastel, axanthic. That'd be nice. So we'd write like fire, yellow belly, pastel, axanthic. Under sex, it's pretty simple, right? Male, female. So we'll mark it male or female. Once we pop it, get a positive identification. If I pop it and I'm like, gee, this looks female, but I'm not 100% sure, I want to recheck that, I'll put a female in the question mark. That tells me to go back and recheck that, which we do sometimes. Code. Code sounds a little weird. So what code means for me is I'll code these animals pretty soon after they're out and set up after post-shed. Code can be one of 3 things. Code is going to say H. That means it's a holdback. I'm keeping that. P. That means I've earmarked that one for a Patreon special. So we do a special once a month on Patreon. If you're not a member, you should be. And then you'll also see S, which is code for sell, which means this is a snake I plan on selling. So H, P, and S will be in our codes. Your codes may be different. You may not need to code it, but I have found coding is good. It lets me go back and look at some point, make sure I'm on track with the number of holdbacks I want, and make sure I have enough things marked for a Patreon sale. And I can always go through there and alter those codes and change them as the year goes if I choose to. Ready. What does ready mean? Ready is we'll go through here at some point in the breeding season. We have all of our babies, not all of our babies, we'll have our babies, and we'll just have a day where we'll start weighing all of them in order. And if it's ready, which means it's hitting its minimum weight, it's had enough meals, it's done all those things, everything looks good, we'll mark it with a Y for ready. We'll leave it blank if it's blank. If it's a hold, we'll just mark it H because I don't even need to check that one. It's mine. So you'll always see Y's and H's there. If you see it blank, that tells me next time I need to recheck that again because it's not ready yet when we have an update. Listed. Listed is how I know if I've listed it. So nothing should ever be listed unless it has a Y for ready, right? And then once I put a list together, I will now mark those snakes listed. This is things I learned because I would list them. I wouldn't mark that I'd listed them before, and it became very difficult. And did I list that? Did I not? I have to track back through posts and shit like that. Real pain in the ass because once I've listed it and it's been on Patreon, if it doesn't sell there, then I can go ahead and do whatever with it, right? So then you have dispo. Dispo just would be marked. If we listed it, somebody bought it on Patreon, we'd write sold right there, and then usually I have one, which I didn't put in here yet, because again, I just started making this. We'll have one for if it's shipped out, or we'll mark it shipped, we'll bold it. We've started doing something to mark when we've shipped that animal. Bolding seems to be the easiest way, because it's really visual that, hey, this is sold, it's been put to bold, we know we shipped it. And then you'll have this pairings that didn't go. That's something we started tracking a few years back, because you'll have a pairing that, let's say here we're pairing, what would be a great example? I know it would be a good one. So this Orange Dream Pastel down here, right? It's been locked to my Bumblebee. Last year, I know she didn't go. So let's say she has eggs this year. That's awesome. We cut the eggs. We're expecting some Pastel Orange Dreams, some Bumblebee Orange Dreams, and that's why I know she didn't go. I put Apollo to her because he'll breed anything. Let's say we cut those eggs and they just don't look anything like they're supposed to. Like, we are not hitting what we're expecting. We can go back in the previous year or even the year before that and say, okay, what do we pair this animal to? That will tell us a lot of times, oh, look, here's the pairing. Hey, that looks like what we're seeing. We now know we're dealing with a retained sperm clutch. So tracking those really helps us know what is going on in our collection. And then at the end, we'll run some total numbers. How many babies did we produce? What was our average clutch size? What was our slug percentage? And what was our live hatch rate percentage? Those tend to be the numbers I like to track. That kind of tell me how things went. And that's kind of, honestly, it. Kurt, can you give anything else we track? Whew. That sounds like all pretty simple. But here's the thing, guys. We first started doing this. I can go back, and I will really quick for you. We always tracked what we produced because of the serial number system we had early on. So if I go back to 2015, right? See if that'll, I don't want to do that. Just open. Will you just open for me? You're a different kind of form. It's so old. We're seeing if it's going to, I know it'll open, but I have to go in there and tell it to open with. I will show you what that, hey, you did it. So we tracked it a little different back then. Let me do this really quick, Kurt. Whoop. That way we don't have names on there for other people in case there's addresses and numbers and shit like that. Get that off there. Okay. So that's where all the hold stuff is and sold, what went to a show. So you can kind of see that, but I also don't want they may not want their name on there. So what we had tracked then is didn't change much. So this is how it looked back then in 2015. Clutch number, this kind of information. We've cleaned it up. ID number, there's those ID numbers, right? Here's the morph, that all changed. Male, female. We were tracking birth weights back then. I have found tracking the birth weights does not really help me much. Why the hell do I care what they weigh when they were born? You can do it. It ain't going to hurt you. I'm more concerned with their weight when we go to sell them. It was easy to remember what was ready. We didn't have that many. And as you can see, that first year, we only had clutch 1, clutch 2, clutch 3, and that's it, with a total production of 24 snakes. And look at those little guys, 50 grams. Holy shit, they were little. So there wasn't a lot. Here it was pretty easy to remember, but we also wanted to add more information because when you go from 3 clutches and 24 animals to 240 animals, which is just ramping up to 30 clutches, let's say, although those are all big clutches. They had 1 5, a 10, and like a 9, so that's not really a fair ramp. But you get my point. You're going to have too much of this to remember. So we started tracking more and more things to help us. We didn't even have codes for hold or keep there. We were just marking that in the disposition area. So it has really molded, right? It's changed. You can see we didn't track slug rate. We didn't have any animals we lost. We had a perfect that year. It's easy to do when you have 3 clutches only, not they're perfect, but there you are. When you have what we had last year, 44 sets of babies, it isn't going to be that way. Typically, I wish it would. So anyway, that's kind of give you an idea of the evolution of that, because your numbers tracking is going to evolve. What I would tell you is you're never going to track too much stuff. I wish that we'd started off tracking more and scaled it back. as opposed to tracking little and scaling up like we've had to do, but that's just part of it. Kurt, anything you want to add about this?
No.
All right.
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
So out of all of this, what do you think is the most important thing to track out of everything that you went over? If you had to pick one.
If I had to pick one, well, it's probably your sales information. You got to ship that out, but I think that goes without saying. Are you talking about breeding wise or like numbers wise?
Everything that you said, like, is it more important to track feeding, more important to track, like, if they're locking, what's breeding, more important to track once the babies?
I would say it's once the babies are born, and that's just because the idea of the serial number and the ID number helps you so much down the road with what you're dealing with and knowing who's what and double checking genetics and looking back through history. But it's such a different thing. That's a really tough question to answer. I mean, I would say if you're looking at two different ways, you have to log where your sales go. If not, unless you're at a show, then then don't fucking matter. People buy it, they take it out of there, problem solved, right? But I would definitely say logging the individual baby, the serial number and morph is probably the most important thing. And that's because you can give that to your customer. I think it adds an air of quality to your animal. It doesn't change the actual quality of the animal, but when that animal's parents and genetics are tracked, and you can track it back a generation if needed when somebody calls and asks about it, or they go, well, how do you know this is there? How do you know it's this line? Look, man, I produced it for 4 years coming back from here. And you can always go back and track those numbers. I feel like that's a very important thing. So I like that on the tubs because this is a total different type of tracking, right? I would say the most important thing to track for breeding purposes to me is, it's probably the ovulations, maybe. Tells you when to get to incubator ready. Although you can miss those and not be. Actually, it's probably the feeds. I'd say it's the feeds. The reason for that is the feeding is the base. It tells you if an animal's ready to go or not, ready to even be bred. If she's not eating, if there's a problem, it lets you know what's going on health-wise. It tells you a lot of things. So I'd say the feeds. Because even if you just did the feeds and you didn't track locks or ovulations, you're still going to produce animals. You just may not have some information as to when dialed in. But they're going to ovulate, still going to have eggs. But if you're not tracking your feeds, you may run into some health issues with animals because you're more likely to breed a male to death. You're more likely to breed a female when you shouldn't. You're more likely to have some of those issues. So probably the feeds, I would think. All right, any other questions?
No.
All right, guys, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. We're going to slide over to Patreon and talk about how we choose, since we're talking about records today, our holds and our Patreons and our sales. What goes into that decision-making process. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.